The bracelet on Emma's wrist had become heavier than ever, not in weight, but in meaning. Each time she touched it, she felt the ghost of Daniel's words reverberate through her heart. Because I care, more than I should. They haunted her days and lingered in her dreams, leaving her torn between the life she had with Mark and the undeniable connection she felt with Daniel. Mark was still unaware. He remained immersed in his work, checking emails at all hours, consumed by obligations that had slowly taken him away from her. Emma loved him, she truly did, but love without presence had become a hollow thing. Daniel's attention, quiet and unassuming, filled spaces that had long been empty. Every small gesture, every thoughtful glance, left her heart racing in a way that Mark no longer could. For days, Emma avoided Daniel. She stayed busy, ran errands, and threw herself into work. She told herself that distance would help, that if she didn't see him, she wouldn't feel the pull that had grown impossible to ignore. But the universe seemed determined to challenge her one evening. Just as the sky shifted from gold to deep indigo, Daniel appeared at the door. His expression was calm, but carried a weight she had seen in his eyes before, mixture of hope and hesitation. "I wanted to come by," he said softly. I can't keep avoiding you, Emma." Emma's chest tightened. She swallowed, forcing herself to remain composed. "Daniel, we can't." "I know," he interrupted gently, stepping closer. "I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to hear me." The rain had started again, soft and steady, tapping against the windows and roof. Inside the cozy kitchen, surrounded by the scent of fresh bread and a faint hint of jasmine from the candle on the counter, the world seemed to shrink around them. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the bracelet, a symbol of everything she had tried to ignore. Daniel studied her, his eyes soft yet searching. "I never meant to complicate your life. I never wanted to cause trouble between you and Mark, but I can't pretend anymore. That gift, it wasn't just a thank you. It was a piece of my heart, Emma, and it always will be." Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to step back, to tell him to leave, to erase this moment before it grew too dangerous. But instead, she found herself rooted to the spot, listening as his confession poured into the quiet room like a tide she could not resist. "You shouldn't feel guilty," Daniel continued, his voice breaking slightly. "What we feel, it's real. I didn't choose it, and neither did you. But it's there, and denying it only hurts both of us." Emma pressed her palm against the bracelet, feeling its smooth surface against her skin. It seemed to pulse with the same energy she felt in her chest, a rhythm she had tried to ignore but could no longer. "Daniel, I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice shaking. He reached out instinctively, stopping just short of touching her. "Then don't do anything yet. Just feel. Don't fight it so hard. You've spent so long giving everything to everyone else. But what about you? What about your happiness?" Her heart ached. His words pierced her in a way Mark's never had, speaking to the part of her that had been silenced for years. She wanted to tell him no, to resist, but the truth was undeniable. Daniel saw her, really saw her, and she couldn't unsee him either. The sound of the front door opening startled them both. Mark's voice called from inside the house, breaking the fragile spell. "Emma, everything okay out there?" Panic surged through her. She straightened, turning to face the reality she could no longer deny. Daniel's eyes searched hers one last time, holding all the words they couldn't speak aloud in that moment. I have to go," he said quietly, backing toward the door. His hand lingered for just a second on the handle, and Emma felt the space between them stretch. Heavy with the weight of their unspoken desires, she nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Okay, go." The door closed softly behind him, leaving Emma alone in the kitchen with the bracelet on her wrist. The rain falling outside and a storm of emotions inside her that night. Emma sat in the living room, her thoughts a tangled mess of loyalty, longing, and fear. She watched Mark sleeping soundly in the bedroom, unaware of the turmoil brewing just outside the walls of their marriage. She loved him, yes, but love had changed. It had evolved into something distant, familiar, but no longer fulfilling. And Daniel. Daniel had opened a door that could never be closed. Her fingers traced the heart-shaped charm. It seemed almost alive, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She thought of the way Daniel had looked at her, the gentleness in his touch, the intensity behind his words. That single, simple gift had unlocked a part of her she had buried deep, her need to be seen, to be cherished, to be understood in a way she had longed for. Emma's tears fell freely now, not from sorrow, but from the weight of a truth she could no longer ignore. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what choices she would make or what consequences lay ahead. But she knew one thing: nothing between her and Daniel would ever be the same again. And deep down, she also knew that some doors, once opened, never fully close. The bracelet glimmered in the dim light, a quiet testament to a love that was dangerous, tender, and impossible to ignore. And Emma understood that sometimes the simplest gifts carry the heaviest truths and can change everything in the most unexpected ways. Asterisk. Daniel studied her for a moment, his expression sincere. "You carry so much, Emma. I don't think anyone tells you that enough." Her throat tightened at his words. Mark used to say things like that, used to notice when she was weary, used to remind her that she was enough. But those days had faded into memory. Now, here was Daniel, seeing her in a way her own husband no longer did. Emma forced a smile, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you, Daniel. That's kind of you to say," but inside, her heart ached. Because kindness from him didn't feel simple anymore. It felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she could come back from. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay awake beside Mark, who was already lost to dreams, his breathing slow and steady. Her eyes drifted to the bracelet again, the tiny heart charm catching the faint moonlight seeping through the curtains. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a reminder of attention, of gentleness, of a connection that shouldn't exist but did. Emma pressed her wrist against her chest, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She didn't want to feel this way. She didn't want to admit that something as small as a bracelet had opened. It's a door in her heart she thought was long closed. But deep down, she knew the truth. Secrets had a way of changing everything. And the secret, blooming between her and Daniel, was only growing stronger. The silver bracelet became more than just jewelry to Emma. At first, she wore it only occasionally, telling herself it was to be polite, that Daniel might notice if she didn't. But as the days went by, she found herself reaching for it almost instinctively, as though her wrist felt bare without it. The charm wasn't large or flashy, yet each time it caught the light. Emma's thoughts drifted toward Daniel. She hated herself for it. It wasn't fair, not to Mark, not to Daniel, not even to herself. But the truth was unavoidable. Daniel's gift wasn't just a thank you. It was a thread that tied her heart to his. Whether she admitted it aloud or not, one Thursday evening, the sky outside was heavy with clouds, threatening another storm. Mark had left for work earlier that morning and texted Emma hours ago that he'd be working late again. She wasn't surprised. It was becoming routine as Emma stood in the kitchen, preparing a light dinner for herself. A knock came at the door. She frowned, wiping her hands on a towel before opening it. Daniel stood there, holding 2 paper grocery bags, his hair damp from the drizzle outside. "Hey," he said with an easy smile. "I figured you might not want to go out in this weather." "Brought a few things." Emma blinked, taken aback. "Daniel, you didn't have to. I wanted to," he interrupted gently, stepping inside before she could finish. His tone was calm, but his eyes carried that same quiet intensity she was starting to recognize too well. He set the bags down on the counter, pulling out bread, fruit, a carton of milk, and a few other basics. "You were out of coffee last time I came by," he added with a small grin. "Thought you'd need it." Emma's heart squeezed in her chest. He noticed even that. She swallowed, trying to steady herself. "You didn't have to go out of your way, really." Daniel's gaze lingered on her face, then softened. "It wasn't out of my way." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy, thick with unspoken things. Emma busied herself putting the groceries away, though her hands trembled slightly. She could feel Daniel's presence beside her, warm and steady, filling the quiet spaces that had grown too large in her life. When she finally turned, she found him leaning against the counter watching her. His expression wasn't playful or teasing. It was raw. "Why do you do all this for me?" she asked before she could stop herself. The words slipped out, soft but desperate. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes searching hers as though weighing whether to tell the truth. Then his voice came low and steady, almost a whisper. "Because I care. More than I should." Emma froze. Her breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She wanted to deny it, to laugh, to brush it off as a joke, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his voice. His confession hung in the air between them. It's impossible to take back. She stepped back slightly, her hand instinctively clutching the bracelet on her wrist. "Daniel, you can't, I know," he said quickly, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know I shouldn't feel this way. You're married. You're my brother's wife. I've tried to ignore it, but every time I see you, every time I see how you smile at everyone, but never really get it back from him." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I can't keep pretending, Emma." Tears stung her eyes before she realized they were there. She wanted to be angry, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was his words echoed her own hidden thoughts. The loneliness she'd buried, the quiet longing for someone to truly see hurt, all came rushing to the surface. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You don't know what you're saying?" Daniel's eyes glistened, his chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I don't expect you to feel the same. I couldn't keep it inside anymore." Emma's throat closed. She should have ended it right there, should have told him to leave, to forget, to never bring it up again. But instead, she stood frozen, trembling, caught between loyalty and longing. Finally, she forced herself to speak. "This can't happen. You understand that, right?" Daniel nodded, though pain flickered across his face. "Yeah, I know." His voice was rough, almost broken. "But knowing doesn't make it any easier." The silence stretched again, deeper this time, carrying the weight of all they couldn't say. Emma turned away, wiping at her eyes quickly. She hated herself for the tears. Hated the part of her that wanted to stay in this moment even though she knew she shouldn't. When she finally found the courage to face him, Daniel was already stepping toward the door. "I'll go," he said softly. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you." Her heart ached as she watched him leave, the sound of the rain growing louder as the door clicked shut behind him. That night, Emma sat in the living room staring at the bracelet glimmering on her wrist. She turned it slowly between her fingers, her mind replaying Daniel's words over and over. "Because I care. More than I should." She should have been furious with him. She should have taken the bracelet off and thrown it away. But instead, she pressed it to her chest, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Daniel had spoken the words she'd been too afraid to admit to herself. Words she couldn't forget now, no matter how hard she tried, and though she told herself she would never let it go any further. Emma knew something had shifted, because once the heart speaks, there's no silencing it again. Emma had always believed that life's greatest treasures weren't wrapped in paper or tied with ribbons. She wasn't the type who waited eagerly for birthdays or anniversaries, hoping for expensive surprises. For her, love was measured in small gestures, like when Mark, her husband, used to leave handwritten notes on the fridge, or when he held her hand during late-night walks in the early years of their marriage. But those moments had become rare as the years passed, replaced by hurried conversations and Mark's constant devotion to his work. That evening, the house was filled with the faint aroma of roasted chicken and garlic bread. Emma moved around the dining table, gathering plates and glasses after dinner. Her husband had already retreated into the living room, glued to his phone as usual. The TV hummed softly in the background, but his attention was elsewhere. Mails, deadlines, and clients always seemed to matter more these days. Just as Emma reached for the last plate, she heard a voice behind her. "Hey, Emma," Daniel said softly. She turned, surprised to see her husband's younger brother still standing in the kitchen. Daniel had joined them for dinner that evening, something he often did since he lived nearby. He wasn't much younger, just 5 years, but the difference always seemed to show. While Mark carried the weight of responsibility, Daniel still had an air of freedom about him, as though life hadn't hardened his edges yet. Emma smiled politely. "Thanks for helping tonight, Daniel. I know these dinners can be a bit boring." Daniel gave a small laugh, then hesitated. His hand shifted nervously in his pocket, and for a moment he seemed almost unsure of himself. Finally, he pulled out a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. It wasn't polished or fancy, just neat. Like someone had taken extra care but hadn't wanted it to look too obvious. "This is for you," he said quickly, almost as if the words slipped out before he could stop them. "It's nothing big, really, just something I thought you might like." Emma blinked in surprise. Her first instinct was to refuse gifts from her husband's brother felt unnecessary, even awkward. But the sincerity in Daniel's eyes made her pause. Slowly, she reached out and took the box. The paper crinkling softly under her fingers, she glanced toward the living room where Mark was still on the phone, oblivious to the quiet exchange happening just a few steps away. Then she carefully peeled back the wrapping and lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, simple and understated, with a tiny heart charm dangling from it. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but something about it made her chest tighten. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice softer than she intended. "It's beautiful." Daniel shrugged, trying to play it off. "I just wanted to thank you for always treating me like family, you know? You've been kind since the very beginning, and I thought you deserved something." His words were innocent enough, but Emma felt a flicker of something deeper beneath them. The way his eyes lingered on hers for a fraction too long. The way his voice softened at the end, it was as though the gift carried more weight than he wanted to admit. Emma's fingers brushed the cool silver, and she found herself smiling, though her heart beat faster than it should have. "That's very thoughtful of you. Thank you." Daniel gave a small nod, his lips curving into a shy smile before he stepped back, almost as if he didn't trust himself to stay any longer. "I'm glad you like it." When he left that night, Emma walked him to the door, the bracelet still in her hand. He didn't say much more, just gave her a look that made her feel oddly unsettled. Then he disappeared into the night, leaving her standing there with a gift that seemed far more meaningful than she wanted it to be. Later, as she lay in bed beside Mark, who had fallen asleep with his phone still on the nightstand, Emma slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. The charm caught the faint glow of the bedside lamp, sparkling softly against her skin. It should have been simple, just a small token of gratitude. Yet Emma couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a gift. It was something else. A message left unspoken. And as her fingers traced the tiny heart charm, she felt an unfamiliar ache rise inside her, a whisper of longing she hadn't felt in years. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face, his nervous smile, his eyes holding hers with quiet intensity. She told herself it was nothing, just her imagination. But the thought lingered all the same. Why did it feel like more than just a gift? Emma tried to convince herself that the bracelet meant nothing. It was just Daniel being thoughtful, just a small gift without hidden meaning. That's what she repeated in her head as she went about her days, washing dishes, folding laundry, keeping up with work. But the truth had a way of slipping through when she least expected it. Every time she glanced at her wrist, the delicate silver shimmered in the light, reminding her of the way Daniel's eyes had softened when he handed it to her. She told herself she was imagining it, that there hadn't been anything unusual about the gesture, but her heart beat differently whenever she thought of him. Meanwhile, her life with Mark moved on in its predictable rhythm. Her husband was hardworking, reliable, and stable, but stability had slowly turned into distance. Their conversations were short, practical, focused on bills, schedules, and responsibilities. The warmth that once filled their evenings had cooled into routine. Mark didn't notice the bracelet, or if he did, he never asked. It was Daniel who noticed everything. One chilly afternoon, rain drummed against the windows, turning the world outside into a blur of gray. Emma stood on the porch watching drops roll down the glass railing. She loved the sound of rain, soft, steady, cleansing, but today it carried a sadness she couldn't quite name. The creak of the front door broke her thoughts. Daniel stepped outside, holding an umbrella. He smiled, though his eyes carried something quieter, almost searching. "You'll get soaked out here," he said. Lifting the umbrella over her head, Emma laughed softly, though her chest tightened. "I don't mind the rain. Sometimes it feels nice." Daniel tilted his head, his voice gentle. "Yeah, but you deserve to stay warm." Their hands brushed as he adjusted the umbrella between them. And for a moment, neither moved. The silence stretched, filled only by the steady patter of rain. Emma's heart raced in a way she hadn't felt in years, the kind of rush that came when someone truly saw you. She pulled her hand back quickly, guilt pressing down on her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. But his eyes lingered on her just a moment longer than they should have. That evening, the three of them sat at the dinner table. Mark scrolled through his phone between bites, his attention drifting in and out. Emma tried to keep the conversation light, asking about his day. But his answers were short. "It was fine." "Busy, I've got another early morning tomorrow," he said, eyes fixed on the glowing screen in his hand. Emma nodded, hiding her disappointment behind a small smile. She glanced across the table at Daniel, who watched quietly. When her eyes met his, something passed between them, something unspoken but heavy. It was just a flicker, a moment, but it felt like a secret they both carried. Emma looked away quickly, her stomach tightening. She told herself it was wrong, that she was reading too much into things. But deep down, she knew. Daniel wasn't just her husband's younger brother anymore. He was someone who noticed the little things, like how she added cinnamon to her coffee in the mornings, or how her shoulders slumped slightly when she was tired. He asked questions, listened, and filled spaces that Mark no longer did. And that terrified her. The days that followed seemed to blur together. Daniel would stop by sometimes, always with some Rizana tool Mark had forgotten in the garage, a few groceries he thought she might need, a casual check-in. But Emma couldn't shake the awareness that grew stronger every time they crossed paths. One morning, as she prepared breakfast, Daniel walked into the kitchen with a smile. "You look tired," he said softly. "Did you sleep okay?" Emma laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not really. Too much on my mind, I guess.